22nd, 2020. I already know what it is. It's the Backstage Brawl. I'm your boy, as always, the Golden Child, alongside the People's Champion, alongside Diamond Cutter, alongside my boy Kid Dynamite, and hopefully we get Mean Gene along the way, having some technical difficulties along the way. Of course, Zoom is a very hard place, get the connection. But impactful weekend, pun intended. Slammiversary going head to head essentially with Extreme Rules Horror Show, and we have some news later on, but I just want to start off on the weekend. What started with a podcast between Gallows and Anderson leading into the pay-per-view on Saturday night, basically with EC3 coming back to the fold on Impact. You have your boys Luke Gallows, Carl Anderson pulling up. On Tuesday, you had your boy Brian Myers, a.k.a. Kurt Hawkins, pulling up. You have the WWE invasion essentially coming into fruition in TNA, basically breathing new life. And on the opposite end, you have the horror show. Guys, I just want to get your general thoughts on this weekend, basically hearing about TNA, seeing some clips, seeing what they're doing, and how they're basically staking their claim as that division, that brand.
I like it. It's, from a person who used to watch TNA when they were on Fox Sports Network back in the day. I've always been like a fan of how they always got themselves out there, their name out there, and always had refreshing angles to project their company. And now, all these years later, you have new life. And don't get me wrong, like over the last couple of years, we always said that TNA was always on life support. And even with the Corgan situation and everything else that took place, I think it's good that TNA, Impact Wrestling, is where they're at right now. They've always been forward thinking in terms of pushing fresher, newer stars. And I think now with some of homegrown WWE guys or other superstars going back to that company, I think that it helps them, with a lot of gaps in their talent. Especially in their tag team division, having the Good Brothers go over there. Heath Slater, who now is just Heath, who I know can be a single star on his own. I think they can really do some stuff with him. Eric Young going back home to TNA, which I thought he should never left to begin with. Now you also look at, Kurt Hawkins going there. I think it gives them a lot to work with in terms of their superstars. Deonna Purrazzo, who's over there now as well. It gives them a lot to work with, especially with young, fresher talent. I think this can give Impact Wrestling a leg up.
You think how deep they turn into, like the tag team division, like even, the Motor City Machine Guns coming back. I remember watching them, basically younger teen years, basically, and growing up before, TNA ultimately left Spike TV and had those contract disputes. They were basically one of the unsung heroes of that division. And now you have a loaded tag division that has even more potential tag teams, not only in, Luke Gallows and Carl Anderson, but also, the potential coming together of Heath Slater and Rhino once again, where they had the interaction at the Slammiversary pay-per-view. Diamond Cutter, your general thoughts on what happened this past weekend with Impact?
Let me tell you something. Impact gets a lot of heat, which we all know this. Impact gets a lot of heat from people who really don't watch Impact. And I'm one of them. I'm not even going to sit here and lie. But this weekend, they put on a really good product. I'm not even, hats off to them. They put on a really good product, and they went from being a roster that wasn't so deep to now being a roster filled with veterans and guys that WWE, I'm not going to say didn't want, because I feel like they wanted Luke Gallows and Carl Anderson to stay. If nobody really knows the whole story behind them getting released, they did talk about it on their podcast. But now you have a deeper tag division. Your women's division is now getting a little deeper. You also another thing, Carl Anderson, when he was in Japan, was a single star. So Carl Anderson can be a single star. Heath can be a single star, as Randy said. EC3, Eric Young brings a veteran presence. So, and you can always put him in a world title, you know, in the world title picture. So there's plenty of guys who really can do different things. They have guys who are really diverse. So their roster got deeper in maybe over the weekend, you want to say? Today's Wednesday, so Saturday to Wednesday, their roster got deeper. And it's going to get even deeper because now, you know, Rusev is still kind of up in the air, even though the rumor is he's going to Japan. And you still have other guys who are either on the independent scene like No Way Jose or, you know, others who haven't really done anything. So Impact definitely this weekend definitely was the better product from the horror show. I didn't get a chance to really watch Impact yet, but when I do, I'm pretty sure that I'm gonna stand behind what I just said. So,
it's not even the fact that, you know, you watch the thing. It's just the fact that, like, it's news. You know what I mean? Like, beforehand, certain diehard Impact fans could argue, or diehard wrestling fans, like, of literally every single show, can argue that they had the quality. You know, they had certain levels of quality with Moose and you know, when you know, Tessa Blanchard was running ship as champ, and that whole rivalry that she had leading into getting the title. So they had the quality, but it was just the name brand and the quantity of talent to just back what they were basically spewing. Like, just similar to how we were talking about NWA, you know, not too long ago. Now it's kind of like TNA's just like, wait, hold on. Don't sell, you know, don't basically forget about us. Kid Dynamite, your thoughts, your take on this matter?
You know, generally I agree with a lot of what everybody said. You know, for the past couple of years, I would say since about the beginnings of it, obviously probably around 09, 2010, a little bit before Hogan showed up, definitely after Hogan showed up, there were a lot of issues that the then company TNA was going through with, you know, mismanagement of talent, misuse of originals, overuse of outside talents that were clearly there to either get a payday or because they could easily get a spot off their name value. And in the past, I'd say 5 or 6 years, Impact has done a very good job of rebuilding themselves. A lot of talents that were the lifebloods of the company, like AJ Styles, Bobby Roode, and whatnot, were gone, and they had to start from the ground up. They had to start from scratch, and they've gotten a great amount of talent already, in my opinion, prior to, you know, the quote-unquote WWE invasion that happened over the weekend, right? So the fact that they've added a lot of veterans, it's sort of like having a young team in the NBA and getting some key veteran pieces that can help really push them to that next level and help them mature a little bit faster. Heath Slater as a talent, you know, he's a very good talent that many people have kind of slept on for years now, outside of a couple of big moments in his career, facing Seth Rollins for the heavyweight championship, being in a tag team with Rhino, which is also a possibility in TNA, which could lead to a heel turn or adding more depth to an already strong tag division. Motor City Machine Guns coming back, especially considering we saw Alex Shelley not too long ago in NXT. It's nice to see him back home and in an area where everybody, for the most part, collectively loved him and Chris Sabin, despite them being great single stars in their own right. You know, seeing the likes of the Good Brothers, the fact that they get to continue using the Good Brothers name, which is awesome, because in terms of continuity, when somebody leaves a company, oftentimes copyright claims come in the way and stop you from continuing the brand that you may have made a lot more money off of. So the fact that Heath Slater got to use the Raw promotion to continue his momentum in TNA, and the Good Brothers get to continue using their name and redefine what that name means in Impact, as well as having a dual contract that allows them to do dates in New Japan. Awesome for them. You want to learn more about their story and how they got to that point. Very rockety road, but, you know, watch Talking Shop to figure that out. You know, also on top of that, you know, seeing Brian Myers go over there and the possibilities of even more people going over there, as Eric said. Some people might not be able to go because of COVID, considering they might have contracted it on their own or maybe caught it when they were in the WWE or in AEW. But I think the main takeaway from the weekend, not only the impact, no pun intended, that they left on that show, which was very awesome. Women's match was that match of the night between Deonna Purrazzo and Jordynne Grace. On top of all the people they've collected and added to an already awesome roster, right? All the matchups they can make. It's starting to shift the mindset a lot of people are having in terms of the free agency in professional wrestling. Because prior to, we were talking about names like NWA, which is pretty much a non-factor right now, considering they can't open up shows. Everybody talked about the minute somebody leaves from WWE, they go to AEW. And considering AEW can't take every single name, it's nice to have other avenues that people can take or go to when there's nothing left. And with New Japan reopening up, eventually when, all these all these travel bans are gone, Gaijins are going to be able to come back to work over in Japan. The fact that they have a lot of people right now between New Japan and Noah that are just kind of sitting on the sidelines and may have been working over there that might have worked in America. The fact that Impact is open and is taking advantage of this free agency, of that Black Wednesday that we all dreaded all those months ago, is awesome. Because not only does it help Impact getting even more notable names on their show, which is going to draw attention, the dream matchups are going to draw attention. But now that we have another contender in the battle for who's taking the best talent off the free agency, it's only going to make Impact hungrier. It's only going to make all the other companies hungrier to start getting names immediately. We've seen WWE go on a hell of a run trying to extend contracts and grab people off the free agency so they can lock people down so they can't make impacts anywhere else. Again, no pun intended. But now that Impact is starting to take some names, it's going to make every other company go unnoticed and go, damn, maybe we should have got that. Damn, maybe we should have got that. So I think this is an awesome deal. And yes, Impact won the weekend. The horror show was horrific.
Yeah, let's get into it. Let's get into it. So, the horror show, you had Ray versus Rollins, which pretty much ended, originally they were apparently supposed to use CGI, but ultimately, it ended with Seth Rollins, doing the honors and taking Ray out. You had the Drew versus Dolph match, which ultimately is going to get another go in a couple weeks' time, which basically ties into Raw. I do want to stick on, in the topic of, horror show and Monday Night Raw with this whole Raw Women's title situation, because Sasha Banks versus Asuka, this much heralded match that we thought that, would lead to a penultimate match between Bayley and Sasha Banks, actually ended up extending a feud between Asuka and Sasha. And in a weird way, we kind of have a, similar to MVP, which we'll touch on later. You have a champion who is holding the title and a champion who is never lost it, essentially. What to make, first and foremost, are we booking or burying how they doing the Raw Women's title right now? How we on with that?
I'm gonna bury it. I'm gonna go ahead and say bury it, only because I don't like the fact of how they did it. And over the weekend there were two controversies. One was the whole Ray thing, the whole Ray and his eye situation.
Yeah.
And then, which was, by the way, sidebar, which was really great because non-wrestling fans were even talking about it. And when you can get non-wrestling fans talking about something, you did something very special.
That's right.
Two, the next thing with this whole Sasha Banks and Bayley thing, it's weird because we've seen scenarios where the referee gets knocked out towards the end of the match, and you would naturally see another ref come in to the match. You didn't see that. You saw Bayley basically rip the shirt off the referee and become the referee. And it was weird because she counted to 3, no bell rang, and then you just hear Sasha's music playing. And she grabs the title and leaves. So it's it left something up in the air. It was just did she actually win the title? Did she not win the title? So now you lead to this match where basically you could have booked it differently on the horror show. You could have booked it differently as, you know what, we're just going to restart the match and have it to where, maybe there's some type of stipulation into it. Because it's Extreme Rules. At the end of the day, every match is supposed to be a gimmick match on this pay-per-view. So that could have been your chance to do something where this could have been a gimmick match.
And you know what, with that, I think it's one of those things where not only the gimmick aspect kind of ties into it, but it's just the conclusiveness of it all, right? We can argue that there was 3 situations, one of which, obviously there was a reason, with Apollo Crews, potentially being out with COVID. But, you had that, you have the Raw Women's, and then you had the main event, which was a swamp match, which is very polarizing in its own right, its own entity, where everyone is just kind of like whatever interpretation you have is right, which is a scary thing because there's not one conclusive thing. Like, did Bray Wyatt win? Did Braun Strowman win? Does that lead to something down the line? We have to find out on the next episode, similar to the Raw Women's title and of that nature.
So the Wyatt thing, just to touch on that real quick.
Yeah.
The Wyatt thing, I think everybody will agree with me. It didn't matter who won that match. That was probably, in my opinion, one of the best, if not the second best, because Taker is number one.
Mm-hmm.
The second best cinematic match that they've done so far. Because it was everything that it was supposed to be. Braun was supposed to go home and fight his demons. Look the devil in the eye and fight his demons. And that's exactly what he did. And then the devil himself popped up, which was Wyatt, the Fiend Wyatt. And that was exactly what it was supposed to be. It was supposed to be a horror movie. Braun saw himself, the monster that he used to be. Wyatt tried to get him to turn into that monster, and it didn't happen. So now you face now the third face of Bray Wyatt, which is the Fiend, which Braun's never faced before. So ultimately, everybody feels like, listen, he's going to lose his title at SummerSlam. But we'll see what's going to happen, how they're going to book it. But I think they booked the Swamp match exactly the way it was supposed to be booked. I loved it. I loved every aspect of it. And that's why I'm rocking the Wyatt t-shirt today.
Yeah.
He definitely if the horror show wasn't as bad as far as everything else went, this was their limelight. This is where they strived at. That was where they took the show from being, I would say, probably a C plus, maybe a C minus. It went from like a C minus to maybe like a B minus, all for that match alone, for me at least.
Generous grader right there.
I agree. I can attest to that. And like you hit it on the head in terms of the match, the Swamp match. I thought the Swamp match was really, really good too in terms of what it was selling. Like you had to sell that match the way it was supposed to, you know. And I know we've all given WWE a lot of shit in terms of how they do things, but their bread and butter is their production and how they, you know, cut scenes. Their production is basically their bread and butter. That match, it wasn't supposed to be whether who won or who lost. It was basically to serve a purpose, and they served that purpose. And to see that it was definitely what was needed to basically close off that night, and to see, you know, the Fiend come out of it at the end. Also, earlier in the night, like up to that point, my only gripe with Extreme Rules horror show, there were good, solid matches, but the thing about it was like the finishes were kind of screwy, which is what people were up in arms about. But I don't get why were people up in arms about the Swap match. I think the Swap match was really one of the highest, you know, the highlights of that night. And I thought,
I mean, like the thing is with that though, like with the horror show is, to Eric's point, if the rest of the pay-per-view didn't have the same redundancy of, let's say, the finishes, perhaps the horror show, like the main event, the Swap match, would have held up on high standard. Exactly. Because there's so much inconclusive, like the women's title match, even to extent the WWE Championship title match, which now we're getting a rematch of. It was conclusive, but in the framework, they worked it into the fact that it's still a feud that it's essentially turning a pay-per-view that you're trying to promote and trying to aggrandize into a extended Raw. Did Sasha win? Did she lose? Find out on the next episode. Did Bray Wyatt win or lose? Find out on the next episode. So,
you know,
yeah.
That, to that point, you know, I don't hate that. I'll say this. Maybe when we were kids and pay-per-views were $60, like off rip all the time, I would have been a little bit upset with that. But, you know, the fact that the WWE network is a little bit more readily available and makes you have to pay less for these, I'm not as upset at that. I do think pay-per-views should matter and they should be treated with respect. But I don't mind having like those find out next time on Dragon Ball Z vibes on certain matches. But I do agree that you know, it was just the momentum of the pay-per-view had this domino effect of every match felt like it got hokier and more spontaneous for the wrong reasons, if that makes sense. Like a lot of these ideas on paper weren't bad. It's sort of like Spider-Man 3. It's like you had a lot of cool ideas that could have worked in separate, mediums. But you put them together, and because they all have like this weird like choppiness where they should be independent on their own, you kind of get this feeling of like, as a whole production, this suffers even though there are highlights in different places. Like for example, Sasha Banks and Asuka. They had a good match, sloppy in some areas, but they had a pretty good match, and it got, for the most part, the best reception in ring wise from a majority of the show. Like a lot of people like the match up until the finish. But the finish itself, when you actually look at it, wasn't that bad. It was just one of those things where it's like, it's in the middle of a lot of bullshit. You know what I mean? Like when you look at the elements that Bayley could play off with her being the referee, promos such as, well, the referee didn't get there in time, so I was making up for it. Maybe you referees should do your job. Why is every referee a lightweight and gets knocked out every couple seconds? These are easy things she can play up to as a heel that would have only progressed what she's already been doing as a heel and made her better, right? The fact that it was a controversial finish makes Sasha look bad because even though she dominated a majority of the matchup, she still couldn't beat Asuka, right? So the fact that this had to come into play for her to win, these are elements that work towards their narrative very well. And it makes Asuka, in theory, seem a lot tougher as an opponent. The fact that the whole story of the match was, I'm trying to neutralize that Asuka lot because once you wrap it in on me, I'm done. So the fact that Asuka's that dangerous and Sasha had to go down that route and the finish went that way, in theory, it's only supposed to help Asuka. But because of the way that the card was and how Extreme Rules, we went into it with a gut feeling like this is going to be bad because a lot of this stuff, the way they're setting it up, looks like it's doomed to fail. In a lot of ways, it delivered on the fact that it was overall a hokey show. Braun and Bray is a cinematic match that in a regular, like, pure wrestling card stand out as, like, unique entity of the card. But because there was a lot of hokey shit on this show, it ironically fit the theme of being hokey because of how unrealistic it is, Like it fell into that by default. And if it's like it got grouped in with a crowd it wasn't meant to be with, but it had enough characteristics that it could fit, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
The eye for an eye match, you take away the athleticism and the caliber of a match you expect out of Ray and Seth Rollins, what do you really have? If it wasn't for the talents that were in that match, we wouldn't have watched as long as we did outside of wanting to watch a train wreck. Like people are saying, well, it wasn't that bad in certain regards, but it's like, it's Ray and Seth. They've proven time and time again their caliber as talents. Of course, they made it watchable. But seeing Ray have like a gumball eye in his hand for a split second when they cut the camera and all the things that they did, and then Seth, I don't even know if the puke was real, to be honest, because none of it got on his beard or anything, so I didn't know how realistic that was. But, Seth vomiting this and that, it just came across as very corny for the fact that, it re-emphasized the fact that they could have just had a regular match to lead into SummerSlam.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's how I feel about that. It's just overall the show was hokey and everything fit with the hokiness because everything had this controversial, unsatisfying deal. So it just, as a product, felt like that because of coincidences and the setup of the pay-per-view.
So touching on the hokiness, if you will, it did lead to Monday Night Raw, which, of course, Bayley explained her piece by saying, she's a role model. And as a role model, you have to do things like take place of a referee, et cetera, et cetera. And then you had Drew and Dolph, that situation, basically, that is going to lead to, in 2 weeks, they're going to have that match. Stephanie McMahon showed up, and made Raw Women's rematch between Asuka and Bayley. But in the framework of that, we had a Kairi Sane sighting. Kairi Sane pulled up. She caught the W, and it's rumored that this may be her last match. Now, for the sake of time, and I know it's close to vest for you, Ty, your thoughts on it? The floor is yours.
So the rumor is that Kairi will be leaving to go to Japan. There have been a lot of different analyses on what that might mean. A lot of the stories kind of just go to the point of she wants to be with her husband, who she's been in a long-term, a long-distance relationship with for a while prior to getting married. And she just wants to be home. I mean, she misses her family. She misses being happy for the most part, outside of just being with her comrades. There have been rumors that she'll go to Japan, possibly be an ambassador for WWE. So I don't know if WWE has a clear-cut idea of what they want for her in-ring future. There are rumors that she'll go to Japan, finish out her contract if it isn't already finished, like the rumor's saying, right? And then go back to Japan, wrestle for a year, and retire. There's a lot of murmurs and rumors about what's going on, and we won't know until any of that comes to fruition. But in the case that Kairi leaving now eventually leads to her leaving the company, which is what some people are, rejoicing, hoping that it happens, or some people are disappointed that it happens. My honest opinion on that is WWE messing up is an understatement. And there are many different reasons for that. For one, Kairi Sane as a babyface, as we saw in the Mae Young Classic and in NXT, is one of these very weird entities where she can get very over without having to talk very much. Something that talents from her homeland like Asuka and Shinsuke have both proven they can kind of do, whether it be in their own respective companies in Japan or here in the WWE. A lot of Japanese talent have this ability to be very infectious, and Mexican talent, and a lot of national talent in general have that ability to be very infectious, get over their personality and their character of who they're supposed to be without having to really speak the way WWE demands a lot of their characters to do, right? And whether it's moments like, her and Asuka dancing around and having fun in the ring, or, another moment iconic from TakeOver where they played baseball, Io and Kairi, in the middle of a match, and it got a pop from the crowd, like, she's a very versatile performer who has the ability to capture the audience if given the opportunity without having to do much of anything, which goes to show you how much she has to offer, especially considering she can speak English, especially considering that she doesn't get many promo segments to herself or moments where you could see other character traits like a Booker T getting beat in a grocery store type moment where you don't even have to talk that much. You're just showing off your range as a performer. And when you consider her being brought up to the main roster around the time they were messing up with Bayley, who could have been the top babyface of the women's division for the next decade, it feels like, right? She could have been a suitable replacement for that because of how infectious she is and lovable she is, to the point where people were constantly saying, we got to protect Kairi Sane at all costs. Like, she's a very, very good talent to have. She's a veteran that could help other talents of her size. She's a lovable person backstage. She doesn't cause any problems. She's not problematic. She doesn't have issues like a lot of talents WWE forcibly tries to push. And it reinforces a narrative that even if you make the best out of opportunities that you have in the company, no matter how talented you are, how much work you do, the WWE system isn't really set up to where your effort will always reflect your position. Like, you can work really, really hard and do the best that you can, but if you're not on the company's mind, if you're not one of the prioritized talents that WWE knows they can make money off of in the short term, they're not going to use you. But they do recognize your talents. They're going to use you to elevate the people that they're prioritizing because they need bodies. And that's kind of the slap in the face that I get from this situation. And we've seen it many times with many NXT talents transitioning to the main rosters of the main shows, right? The top rosters. We've seen that with many talents who have come into NXT and not gotten fair shakes as well. In the case of people like Sandy Callahan, who's doing phenomenal in Impact right now. In the case of a Kenta, who, to his credit, yes, got injured, but it wasn't injured by his own accord. A lot of times he was working with talents that they were trying to give chances to that weren't ready for those spots, and it cost him in the long run, So for me, seeing Kairi in a position where she even has to question leaving is already sad, even before the departure happens. And I feel bad that after all the things that she proven to the WWE audience through the Mae Young Classic, through NXT, through her versatility in the Kabuki Warriors, which was a makeshift team, let's be honest, just to pair two Asian talents, which is a whole nother issue. The fact that a lot of people kind of get typecasted in these racially positioned roles where it's like, if we have one Asian, we can make them very unique because there's one Asian or one black person.
We getting into that. We getting into that.
Yeah, we're going to get into that later.
Yeah.
There's a little preview, but the fact that they can't find anything for someone like her when she's such a great asset, and when you see them struggling with some of their pet projects, like Lacey Evans, who was originally supposed to be a top heel, but eventually became a babyface out of the blue because of the Saudi thing, or the fact that you see someone like Naomi, who we'll get to later, who's not having a position, it just goes to show you that, like, again, with one of the most, if not the most talented roster in the company's history over the past 5 years, you can't use a 3-hour show to promote some of these talents. Shayna Baszler just got back on TV this past week or a week ago. Bianca just got remembered about a week ago, same show. We were talking about it last podcast. So it's very infuriating. As a Kairi Hojo fan prior to her coming in as Kairi Sane, it sucks to see that her peak was being under Triple H as opposed to being under Vince. But, unfortunately, that is the tell of the tale when the company has a disorganized system on how they prioritize and use their talents. So yeah. I wish her nothing but the best if she does choose to leave.
Yeah, and like you hit on a lot of points, and in regards to just the whole fact that you can do all you can. You can do all you can. If you're not the quote unquote chosen, then perhaps you're not gonna basically be picked, and you'll
Yeah.
be typecasted in a way, even whether it be racially charged or just the fact that you're a secondary champion or things of that nature. Which is what I wanted to. I have in my notes MVP, basically claiming himself as champion. I was gonna talk about Ziggler being the new Christian. We could shelf that. We could shelf that.
Oh boy.
But on the bright side of basically the whole like pitting black people with other black people or Asian with other Asian, we have an all millennium rivalry going on, and it somehow sprouted out a returning Mustafa Ali. Now I don't know about y'all,
Oh yeah.
but I was hype as a mug. And if I had a book or berry, I am buying that. I am booking it, buying it, sealing it, putting it in the main event every week. What say the rest of y'all, real quick?
I am booking it.
Simple.
Because I know for a fact MVP is a strong enough character to basically carry each and every one of these guys alongside this feud. And from what I've been seeing, and it's been evident, he's strong enough to basically have creative control in terms of what he sees in these competitors. And I know since he's been back, his main goal is to highlight and enhance the talent that's been unutilized. Cedric Alexander, for one. Ricochet, who I love, as another. And Mustafa Ali. I'm happy he's back. I'm just very disappointed in the fact that they didn't let him continue with that hacker gimmick.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it sucks because, like, had he come back with that kind of, like, firepower, that kind of thing, it would have made his return that much sweeter, that much better in order to help those two in that six-man tag last week. I said on Twitter, through the Backstage Brawl Twitter page, that when Shelton won the 24/7, 7-Eleven, I-95 South championship, that it should be a TV title at this point. Because at this point, if you're going to give it to someone within the Hurt business, because business is always good, you should make it into a TV title. And Shelton Benjamin is one of the most underutilized guys on the roster, not because of the fact that he's, older and whatnot, but because, he's a guy that you can use to value and help elevate younger talent. And you can use that that championship that he has to help other talent in a sense. And MVP, I love what he's doing. I love the fact that he's been able to string guys along that he knows that can be more utilized in this company. Kind of like what he did in TNA as well. And I think he is a strong enough personality to walk into Vince's office and say, listen, I don't give a damn what you say. I want this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy on TV. You may not give a damn about him, but I do. And whatever way I may utilize them, it may not be for a championship game, but just to get them on TV and get them the exposure that they need to give fans a different insight that, hey, these guys can be major players in the next few years. Let's see what they're about. And now you're starting to see the seeds being sprouted with the Hurt business and having that rivalry with Ricochet, Cedric Alexander, and of course now the returning Ali, who came back Aki and is ready to make an impact. No pun intended.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely hype on it. I'm pretty sure Randy and I both echo all the things in the chat and Backstage Brawl Podcast. Just hype, man. I'm just hype. But about this whole Dolph Ziggler deal, because he's coming out, he's asking essentially one more match. And, at first Drew is literally walks up and he's like, yo, bro, I just beat you 24 hours ago. What's good with you? He gives him 3 pieces of soda, walks out the ring. Dolph Ziggler essentially, calls him a bitch, I believe, paraphrasing. And it triggers Drew McIntyre to ultimately accept his request for one more match in 2 weeks' time. which in my mind can potentially be something in terms of a retirement angle, maybe. I don't know. Who knows? But in regards to Dolph Ziggler and his like character in this story arc, especially now, is he the new Christian? Is he the new one more match guy? Is this what we're doing?
That's an interesting one, because we've said it, before we even started doing the podcast, that like there are a lot of parallels between Christian and Dolph Ziggler in terms of how they've been used in terms of their singles run. Like, I wouldn't say they're clear cut the same, but it feels like they kind of intersected similar avenues. Like, I think the thing with Dolph is that, he's using a lot of these filler angles kind of to fill out a spot. And it just so happens, like we said before, this is a storyline that has some backstory, which WWE is notorious for ignoring. But it's just the fact that, like, it's happening in the middle of the SummerSlam build, or as we're getting the SummerSlam, the people are kind of turned off by it. I personally think it's a good thing that they're saving this for a TV main event. We need more title defenses on television, first and foremost, for all the belts, to be quite honest. The fact that you kind of save them exclusively for pay-per-views makes the outcomes even more predictable. But, this is close. I mean, you could have ended it at Extreme Rules. I don't know if they wanted that to be the last show, considering the bad press they got from that show. So, they need a TV main event. They need something for Drew to hold him over. Do it. Get it over with. You don't have to see any more of that. In terms of Dolph being the new Christian, I'll say, in terms of asking for another match, I guess loosely, yes. Will this be his gimmick? Him just going after past rivalries and, trying to avenge losses and stuff.
Me.
Yes, basically the evolved
Come
form
back,
of
Goldberg, you stupid son of a.
I mean, he was like low key. He was doing that with Kofi, like with the "it should have been me" thing.
Yeah.
If that's his gimmick, you know what? In a similar sense to what Randy said with Shelton using the 24/7 championship, which, by the way, I think it would be a cool storyline idea if MVP signed a deal to make the 24/7 championship not a defendable title everywhere and has to be defended like a regular belt. If MVP did something like that for Shelton, that'd be awesome. But to that point of Shelton being used for younger talent, if Dolph could just get to work with the younger crop of people and give other people opportunities on this whole like midlife crisis angle he's doing right now, that's the best fit for him at this point. Because, I mean, ironically, I guess he kind of is like Christian, because that's what Christian was doing before he got kicked into retirement.
Exactly. 11 to 30.
So, like,
yeah.
So you could do that. Have Dolph just float around the secondary title scenes, or float around just working with talents that need a little bit of a push. I still want to see Dolph and Chad Gable actually have a program. That would have been awesome from just a wrestling standpoint, Let him do what Shawn Michaels was doing in 05, outside of Kurt and Cena and all that. Basically just let him rock with people like the Masters and Carlitos of the current times. That's all you really can do for him now, because no one's really going to believe him in these other roles, himself included. So.
Exactly. Like Dolph has been very vocal about, his role, especially, in interviews with Chris Van Vliet, interviews like with the rest of the WWE guys. So like we definitely know where his mind is. It's just like, yo, man,
Speaking of Van Vliet, we need our own title. Just like he got his own title. We need our own belt. We need a Backstage Brawl champion.
That was years and years of him grinding. We still early we still getting
If we can get over like a SoundCloud rapper, we could just fast forward through all of that, 2K Accelerator that.
Hey,
look.
Listen, if you wanna pull up and become a legend, a living legend, it is what it is. But Randy Orton gonna kill you. Just like how Drew, for all intents and purposes, I ain't gonna lie.
He's next.
People are waiting for you to get
that match needs to happen for SummerSlam. The two people that, like, bro, when everyone talks about how do you make a professional wrestler from the ground up, those are the two names that come up in the past 10 years more than any other two names, besides maybe Okada. But it was originally Orton, Drew, and Okada. You got 2 out of the 3 in your company. And you got them both as the top stars of the show. Make that match happen at SummerSlam, man. Give them that 30 minutes, please. Originally, I wanted Edge to interfere to continue their story, but Edge might not be back until next year. So
yeah, I saw a theory. I saw a theory from I forget where. Orton wins it at SummerSlam. Royal Rumble, Edge returns, surprise return, wins. Mania, Edge versus Orton. I remember seeing that deal. So, hey, listen, the possibilities are endless, but hopefully after the Dolph situation, as a Dolph fan, we see like Orton come out of nowhere, RKO the living out of Drew McIntyre, leading into the program to the biggest party of the summer in SummerSlam. Want to shift gears to SmackDown, where I know we didn't show love to SmackDown last week. I know it was on me. I put it on myself. But it was most in part because I already knew that, similar to how Extreme Rules Horror Show was, it's kind of like they bring up this big program, AJ versus Matt Riddle, and you're like, oh, they're gonna give them. It's not gonna give them the title. It was something that was either gonna be conclusive, but leading into another story, which it was, or just a random. Yeah, it was a great, very fantastic match. It did lead to whatchamacallit. After the match, AJ Styles shaking his hand and walking out. Now, albeit he didn't help Matt Riddle out when he got his ass whooped, he did shake his hand, walk out. And then meanwhile, you have Baron Corbin, of course, the underlying rivalry with Matt Riddle, a.k.a. the heel version of Dolph Ziggler, like the gateway, well, when Dolph Ziggler was a face, but basically the gateway between NXT and the main roster, that first feud. So Baron Corbin, Matt Riddle on SmackDown, that's pretty much the undercard feud. We discussed the main event feud for SmackDown. What's our thoughts on how that basically worked out and our expectations for it this upcoming Friday night?
I'm going to say this real quick. It is a crime that AJ Styles has not been on a pay-per-view since Money in the Bank. That's just me. It's a crime. It's a crime that's gone unpunished, and it needs to be punished. It's very punishable. Next thing. The match last week, despite how I feel about Matt Riddle, very good match. I enjoyed it. Matt Riddle just got an opportunity. We all knew he wasn't going to beat AJ Styles for the Intercontinental Championship. But this was something that needed to happen. Sorry about that. This is something that needed to happen. Now, the next thing, looking forward to this Friday. Right now, the dynamic is that last week wasn't that good of a show as far as how everything went. The only highlight was the Intercontinental Championship match. We're looking forward to getting answers from the whole Wyatt Braun thing. We're also going to see, what's going on with Matt Riddle and Baron Corbin, which is probably going to be Matt Riddle's first official feud, I guess you can say, in WWE as far as being on the main roster.
Didn't we call Corbin as the first feud?
We did.
I mean,
we did.
Yes. Again, he is the gatekeeper from NXT. It used to be Dolph. Gatekeeper, NXT, main roster, Baron Corbin.
We called this feud happening months ago.
Months ago we called it.
I mean, it was fairly easy.
I know y'all watching this WWE.
I will say this much. I will say this much though. Shouts out to Shinsuke Nakamura and Cesaro this past weekend. New tag champs. So this upcoming week, I know there's some
That's another thing I have a gripe with too. Sorry to cut you off. That's another thing I have a gripe with. Cesaro, I love Cesaro. I'm just tired of him being in tag teams. I'm tired.
Bro, I said it last week. If you didn't know Cesaro for his individual talent and you watched him over the course of his career, WWE or not, you could reasonably typecast him as a tag team specialist.
Mm-hmm.
The way he is consistently booked. It's very true, and it's very apparent. Now, I'm happy. Hey, Shinsuke still got an undefeated streak at Extreme Rules. That's great. That's some good-ish right there. But I'm going to tell you this right now. The fact that you brought that up, I have, thoughts that considering WWE has recently upped their protocol with COVID, Kevin Owens being a driving factor behind that, as we recently found out from reports. I think y'all might know where I'm going with this. In terms of the Intercontinental Championship, I think there is a possibility. I'm not going to say a high one, but I think there's a possibility that Sami Zayn might be the next person to face AJ Styles, or at least one of the next people to face AJ somewhere down the line. Now, in a perfect scenario, I think that it would be cool if Sami Zayn came back a babyface and AJ was the guy to finally get people to really understand that Sami Zayn is that dude. because, hand on a Bible, outside of Daniel Bryan, and you could even contest this fact, Sami Zayn is one of the most infectious baby faces
Yes.
WWE has under their payroll right now.
Yes, very much.
When you watch that man in NXT, or even when he was on the main roster, in the early parts of his run in the main roster, that man made you believe in everything. His selling is impeccable. His in-ring work is impeccable. And what better person to help get him his juice back as a babyface than working with a heel AJ Styles, who at this point has nothing left to prove. He's just rubbing it in your face. But in the same token, you could also reverse the situation, have AJ be the babyface because people are starting to like him again, and have Sami Zayn come back as a heel, and now his entire group, that whole artist collective, got gold.
Well, the narrative with that is that, in my eyes at least, the narrative is that Sami Zayn never lost the title.
Exactly.
So he has that gripe to come back as a heel and say, well, I never lost the title, blah, blah, blah. So in that sense, I feel like if that was to happen, they would have babyface AJ versus a heel Sami Zayn. It wouldn't really be the other way around.
No, it could work the other way around, because if AJ is boasting and being
could.
braggadocious, then Sammy could easily sit there and say, hey, AJ, you feel like there's no one else you could fight for that Intercontinental Championship? I'll have you know that I never lost that damn thing. I'm the reason why you have that belt in the first place. So if anything, you owe me twice.
I mean, they could spin it like that, because what's gonna happen is like when AEW first got on the scene and Sammy had that whole segment where he was like, you could ask me about AEW. Yeah. It's the same thing. They can spin it like that. Like, I only lost the Intercontinental Championship because, nobody wants to talk about it, but COVID. And they can say it like that. They can spin it like that as a heel thing. So I get what you're saying.
It could be a heel thing. It could also be a babyface thing, because I always got this Shawn Michaels vibe from Sammy, where he could be a dick, but a lovable dick as well. Mm-hmm. In terms of his promo. So, like, there's the possibility. See, we're showing love to SmackDown. Y'all getting your triple dose right now. But, there's so many possibilities. Now, that's not to say Sammy is the guaranteed next person, but it's definitely something I could see in the future if AJ doesn't have any immediate programs. You know what I mean? Like, that's a potential one down the line.
Well, he should definitely be on the SummerSlam card. And if he's not, this will now be the third pay-per-view he hasn't been on now?
Pay-per-view, yep.
Well, who do you think he should face, barring Sami Zayn, assuming that's not a possibility? Who would be a good contender, in your opinion?
Drew Gulak.
Yeah, Gulak would be on the list. I think he's the only one on the list.
My question, do you think Morrison or Miz can't have an opportunity to kind of further their story as well?
That would be cool. And here's why. Because they're finished with Braun, and right now they're basically doing nothing. And you didn't bring back John Morrison just to do nothing. Okay, John Morrison came back for 2 reasons. One, to shut Seth Rollins up, and 2, finally win to win championships. You don't come back to WWE for a certain reason. I mean, him and Seth Rollins been going back and forth between who's the most athletic and who would win between one-on-one and that little rivalry. He came back simply to shut him up in the ring and to win championships. And ever since he's been back, sure, he's won a tag team.
He won already.
And 2, and also his best friend. AKA what JJ dubs the Bro Dynasty.
I brought that up because that's such a cool matchup. Not to cut you off, Jay, but like AJ and John Morrison have only had one matchup that I could find footage of, and that was for a company called Family Wrestling Entertainment for their World Championship. And most of us have had that dream match since like 2007, right? Like AJ and John Morrison, 2 of the most athletic dudes, basically the equivalents in terms of athleticism on their respective companies. If they had an Intercontinental title match at SummerSlam, I mean, given enough time, it could draw parallels kind of like Brett and British Bulldog in terms of the workhorses getting some time to shine. Yeah. Maybe not the main event, but you get what I'm saying. Like, they recently uploaded Ray and Dolph Ziggler from 2010 SummerSlam. You've had a lot of sleepers with that title. So I agree with Eric. Even if it's Miz, AJ and Miz could have a phenomenal match, and AJ knocked Miz's tooth out, so there's still some beef there.
Yeah, that's a fact. I will say this much: like I think there's one glaring thing. Like, our boy Daniel Bryan, like, he's been chilling, and the thing is, because I think there's a lot of story elements that need to be told to make the whole Miz and Morrison dynamic with AJ. But this whole thing about how AJ Styles has inherently become the Intercontinental champion that Daniel Bryan told him he needs to be. So AJ could walk up and say, hey, Daniel, you said You said for me to be a fighting champion. Well, I've been fighting every week. I've been fighting
Reminiscent of like the
Gulak.
John
I've been fighting
Cena
this.
AJ
Yeah,
feud
I've been
years
fighting
ago.
this. I've been fighting that. And meanwhile, you've been home. So how you telling me that I can't be champion when you're the person who's sitting at home on his ass? So you could have that dynamic. And then that brings in that sort of feud. And then afterwards, we can walk down the line and see Miz and Morrison. Because, like, as soon as I heard Gulak, I was like, wait, is Daniel Bryan still, like, what was Daniel Bryan's last involvement in? And this past week, he had a small segment, the small Zoom thing of where he was just saying, hey, listen, AJ, as much as I don't like him, he's basically been a fighting champion and he's going up against Matt Riddle. So they're still spreading those seeds. So don't sleep on AJ versus Daniel Bryan at SummerSlam. I'm telling you, 5-star match in the
Put
making.
that boy on the card.
It's a fact. Both of them. Now, SmackDown, I don't mean to do this. We gave you some praise. Now we have to talk about Naomi. And it kind of ties into the whole thing about this, I believe, earlier today. WWE happened to be on a conference call, I believe, in regards to systemic racism. Stephanie McMahon was basically spearheading the campaign and speech, and she was taking questions, she was getting answers. And it's all kind of embedded in this whole deal of just the stereotyping in wrestling and how they've been kind of typecast in a way. And, you know, she had certain answers that kind of drew the ire of many of our Backstage Brawl cohorts. So Kid Dynamite, People's Champ, I know you both know about it. Diamond Cutter, I know we spoke about it before we got on the show. Before it's all yours. Naomi and this.
Let me preface by saying this to start with Naomi. In my take,
Yeah.
Naomi. Booker T, as we all know, shout out to Booker T for liking a couple of tweets of ours this past week. He made a statement in terms of Naomi, and he was kind of looked at as someone who, I don't want to use a clone word when it comes to Booker T because that's not what he is. It's just unfortunate that his comments, that's what everybody has been saying online and in wrestling groups that I'm in and Black Wrestling Twitter. They have been kind of floating that word around, you know, unfortunately so. And that's a loose word to even use for Booker T. Booker, now, and we talked about this morning. Well, Tyler basically mostly led the conversation this morning with his thoughts.
I'm so sorry.
And I kind of like kept quiet about it, and I had time to think about it. So to lead with that, I love Naomi, and I love her and her work in the ring. She's been there 10 toes deep, 10 years strong, and she's been a women's champion in spite of that and everything else that she's been able to do. In terms of give Naomi a chance, now while it may seem cool, sure, she's been given shit angles over the last couple of years since she's won the championship. And Booker T's comments was basically saying, you know, you got to basically make your own chance, make yourself your own opportunity in WWE. A lot of fans didn't take kindly to that in terms of what he said. And there's also another side to what Booker T basically was trying to reiterate. He's coming from an era where you basically had to make your own chances. And yes, most of his championship title reigns in WCW were either advantageous and not fruitful, but at the same time, he still had those opportunities to become champion, and he still made his own breaks. But that was from a different time in professional wrestling. Now it's more so, you know, especially in WWE, they've been highly stereotypical in how they treat their superstars. Certain comment, you cannot make those comments, you know, in terms of the plight today, in terms of how the industry is today, and how WWE, in some ways, are still slow in basically coming into the new century of thinking and how they view their stars. Now, as to Stephanie McMahon, yes, 13. What was the number? 40% of their champions.
A majority of their champions are people of color. That's true.
Are color.
But it wasn't designed that way.
What? But you know, but it's not really designed that way. Sure, 40% of their champions are of color. That's cool. But at the same time, you cannot use that statistic to base off an argument or a legitimate gripe that many fans and people have had of the company for a very long time. There's still stereotypes that plague the company, and it's not just for people of color. It's also people that, hell, McMahon is an Irish family. They even stereotype their own people. And it's around the company. You look at Asuka, there have been moments where they've stereotyped, everybody from especially the Latins who gotten it the worst. And Stephanie McMahon, in some ways, she's showing her ass here because she basically signed up on the Mexico, the Juventud Guerrera, Super Crazy, and in that group back in 2004, in that era of the Ruthless Aggression era. So you kind of stereotype every denomination or demographic that flood your TV screens and flood your rating systems every week. And for her to kind of make that statement is kind of like one of those political statements. Well, we have this and we have this, so that should be satisfactory. No, and while we're on the topic of, making your own chance, making your own breaks in WWE, it's not necessarily Naomi's to make her own breaks. Sure, her hard work has a lot to do with making her own breaks, but at the same time, it's incumbent of the company to see what they're doing creatively to these characters. It's not just Naomi. It's also current Raw Women's Champion. It's currently, everybody that's under your umbrella, whether they're from Mexico or any different country or demographic. They are in some ways pigeonholing them into different things that they shouldn't be part of. And it's definitely put a black eye on the company for years and continuing so because they're perpetuating it. And a lot of it has to do with the man at the top. Vince McMahon is someone that basically does not see the forest from the trees. He's a guy that literally lives under a rock because he is so steadfast in basically having the best sports entertainment company when you have one of the most culturally diverse rosters and talented rosters that you've had in the company's history. Now more than ever, you have the most diverse, culturally and talented roster in all, in the world, period. And AEW also has some issues with that, but that's on a smaller scale. But talking about the biggest company, the biggest show in town, as they dub themselves as, you're supposed to be the leader in that change. You're not supposed to be perpetuating the same stuff that's been carried on the past 35, 40 years into the 21st century. A lot has changed since that time. And I know with a predominantly white company, the great white hope or white people are more aesthetically pleasing in terms of your market base. But at the same time, there's a huge chunk of your audience base that are from different demographics that are of color. So I'm not saying you have to use that to pander to them. And we're not even saying that for Naomi just to win championships or be in championship contention. We're just saying from our vantage point for people of color to give them better storylines. Hell, we talked about Shelton Benjamin earlier in terms of giving him a 24/7 championship. And I said on Twitter, they should use that as a TV title. They should use that as something to elevate other talent, not just for comedic purposes. And R-Truth, and as it ties into R-Truth, who's basically the comedic foil in all spectrums of every show that they have in WWE. While that may serve a purpose, but at the same time, that's not what everybody does. Everybody has different skill sets. Everybody has different, everybody brings something different to the table. It's like a smorgasbord of talent and different characteristics that you can bring to the table that make the company what it is. But it's also incumbent on the people that are creatively directing this show to see that and basically better accommodate your stars. Now, I know not everybody rises to the top. That's fine. But what fans, what we're asking for is for people to get chances and to be marketed properly. That's all we're asking for. And as it pertains to Naomi, yes, Booker caught a lot of hell for his comments and Mark Henry in the past with Leo Rush and ACH and other things that we've heard and seen in different black wrestling groups or black Twitter, all over from a spectrum. We're not asking in terms of, that person should be champion because they're talented. No, we're just saying let them be incredible feuds that have value. Value them on the roster. Give them something that's valuable for us to watch on TV. And it's not just for people of color. That's for every single person that's on your roster. And it's just fact that sometimes as people of color, we get the short end of the stick.
And you know what? To take it a step further, even just simply because we've seen before us fall in love with characters that have been birthed from stereotypical gimmicks. Eddie Guerrero is a prime example of that. Lie, cheat, and steal. He rides hydraulics, a low rider to the ring and all that stuff. But simply having a character, and I think this is probably where Booker tried to emphasize. I don't know what he was thinking. I don't know what, when he was tweeting it, but like simply trying to work within the gimmick and finding yourself within the gimmick. I think that's what is most important. But the problem is that you have to have a platform in order to express that. And I feel like Naomi has tried hard to do that, because it's a hard sell for you to walk up and your first gimmick is a Funkadactyl. And you're basically second in command to Cameron, who was basically supposed to be the girl that everyone enjoyed because she was more aesthetically pleasing. She was lighter skinned. She was basically more fitter body. In all likelihood, everyone was kind of leaning towards that. But the person who stayed was Naomi. And Naomi persisted, and she stayed, and she maintained, and she grew. And even after that, they established this element of her being this dancer, to tie into the Funkadactyl thing, but also tie into back to her past as an Orlando Magic dancer. She allowed that to be a part of her gimmick, which in a short span of time, they put that at the forefront. WrestleMania, her winning the SmackDown Women's Championship, that was a moment. But it's just those things where you have to let those moments breathe, because once you let those moments breathe, you have fans that are going to be allowed to be invested in you. Eddie Guerrero was not we weren't fans of Eddie Guerrero because he was lie, cheat, and steal and hydraulics and all that. We were fans of Eddie Guerrero because he lied, cheat, and stole death. He did the low riding deal, but it was all those elements that you could stereotype me, but I'ma still be me, and you can confuse that and allow me to be, and allow my passions and whatever you want to give me to be my character. Don't let my character just be this. And you have to offer a platform in order for them to get to that point. Get Ty, you take.
So, I was very passionate about this topic earlier this morning as I was ready to destroy my back at work. But it's a very concerning topic, because a lot of people misconstrue it as like, oh, you just want them to get opportunities because they're black. Not really. But in a sense, you have to understand that WWE's system of how they prioritize talent is broken. Booker T was wrong not because of his logic, but because his words did not apply to the current situation, like Randy has said, like I alluded to earlier when we talked about this before the podcast. The current system of the WWE does not prioritize their talent well enough. They prioritize certain people at the top, certain people that can catch fire, that can give them short-term benefits. But in terms of giving other people chances to slowly grow over time, or to just grow in general, like it's been mentioned before, it just doesn't happen. That's why I was so heated about the Kairi Sane thing. And I made the mention of Kairi Sane because, okay, first for everybody, people of color is not just black people. Let's get that out the way as well. It goes into a huge spectrum. But representation matters. And there are plenty of talents on the roster who have earned their way to the top that are just sitting on the sidelines waiting for an opportunity, a platform to show why they can be an asset to the company. It's not so much just pushing them because of who they are or their background. But in addition to representation mattering, a lot of them have already earned the qualifications, the same ones that a lot of fans throw back in our face when we say these guys should be getting an opportunity, when they're like, oh, you just want them pushed because they're black. No, they've also earned it too. This year, Sami Zayn has been a part of WWE for 6 years. Does it feel like it's been 6 years? No. Kairi Sane's been in WWE for 3 years. Has it felt like 3? It feels like 1.5. You never know, because a lot of these guys are still under contract, but they're barely on television, right? A lot of them barely get these opportunities. And when they are on TV, they're given roles that either they're destined to fail in, and a lot of them exceed those roles. And if they do exceed those roles, that's the peak of their opportunity. That's the peak. They're used to fill a role, and they're not allowed to go beyond that because the company doesn't prioritize that talent. When WWE has multiple Asian superstars on the same show that are in the same division, what does WWE usually do?
Tag team.
Put them in a group. Kai and Tai, a stable, Kabuki Warriors, a tag team. Why is that? And not to say that you can't have genuine Japanese or ethnic tag teams of any kind, of any race, but why is that the default option? Because WWE does not conceive the idea of having Japanese competitors feel completely different from one another. Most of the Japanese competitors that you've seen are always portrayed as stereotypically Japanese because either they're one of a kind, they're usually one of the only people on the roster that look like themselves, or WWE wants to group them together because they don't have an idea of how to use them individually. The best Japanese, most prominent Japanese talent probably in WWE outside of Asuka because of the recent stuff was Tajiri. And Tajiri was stereotyped to hell, to the point where in ECW he used his kicks as a big maneuver, but he also used the Brainbuster as a finisher. Brainbuster was banned in WWE. What was his finisher? A roundhouse kick. What do you expect out of Japanese talents now? Everybody has to be a striker because of the strong style perpetuation. You also have the Ran.
No, that's okay. It's fine. I could just cut it.
Oh, you can edit it out? Okay.
Yeah.
So essentially, Yoshitatsu.
It's
That
default
was my mom era.
Everyone on Asuka from
hold
time to time
on.
roundhouse
Hold
kick. That's some of the only stuff they're allowed to do. Tajiri was stereotyped as a Japanese dude that loved white women. That's a Japanese stereotype, or an Asian stereotype in general, that Asians love white people. They like to date white women, most of the men. The fact that if I gave you a whole laundry list of all the stereotypical stuff WWE has done,
it's crazy. It's crazy, and that's
the point.
Yeah.
The whole point is we want people to have the platforms to do exactly what you're saying. Prove why they should be there. And on top of that, WWE should not just prioritize always giving Charlotte the championship at the expense of an Asuka, at the expense of somebody else. Stop always going back to your safeguards or your rainy day folders.
Well, it's not only them now. It's just the 4 horsewomen. It's at the end of the day, the thing is, and Randy hit the nail on the head. It's not on just these particular stereotypes. It just expanded because it just so happens to be a stereotype. It's just the fact that you don't have these segments to allow the character to build. Because if Booker T didn't have those character development segments, to your point earlier, he would just be another black guy, another black wild guy. Asuka and Kairi Sane, if I were to show a regular person if I were to show like a friend who didn't watch wrestling, WWE, they would probably just see, 2 Asian people spouting, nonsense.
Yes.
You see basically Garza and Thing. They kind of follow the same archetype and ways to Alberto Del Rio and Eddie Guerrero. And it's just and it's kind of that like thing that more or less ensues where yes, there's some good in there, but if you stick right there, it's unfortunately going to fall in line of you just stereotyping people. And with a company that has historically done that, that is a big issue. It's not fair to the characters. Not that they whatchamacallit are being in these gimmicks, but the fact that they can't grow out of it. And I think that goes to a lot of these characters.
You can't expect people. You can't do that. You can't expect people you get an opportunity to make the most out of it, and then you don't consider it as an option to let them rise up on the card.
Yeah.
You can't give these. If you're going to give people a platform, give them a platform where they actually can prove to you being an asset to the company. Don't just give them a spot and be like, do the best that you can. You never know what'll happen, and you're only using them to fill out a spot on the card, and you just disregard them afterwards and go back to your golden children. And that goes for, like Randy said, all the talent on the roster, regardless of race. But it's a bigger issue for people of color and people of race because we barely get proper representation or any representation at all as it is.
Yeah.
And
that's pretty much it. Guys, you've been definitely awesome. I do want to say we are recording this on Wednesday. Couple of hours is going to be NXT and AEW, but Wednesday, July 22nd, aka HBK Day. It is HBK's 55th birthday. Happy birthday to Shawn Michaels. I do want to end it on a lighter note, since we discussed much heavy topics. Just your quick, best, favorite memory of Shawn Michaels. Let me kick it off with the Diamond Cutter. Let's tag him in.
Man, so many. I'm gonna do something a little different. Yeah. I'm gonna go with one of my favorite matches from Shawn Michaels, which there are a lot of them. But if I had to narrow it down to probably my top 2, I would say Shawn Michaels and Chris Jericho at WrestleMania 19. I thought that's one of my favorites. And also Shawn Michaels and Undertaker, the famous one at 25. You can pick 25 or 26. There is no wrong answer. Yeah. And it's funny because I was actually watching a video on YouTube where Shawn Michaels did the whole Miz TV thing, and they had New Day on commentary, and New Day was singing the Shawn Michaels theme song. First off, Big E is he's the funniest dude out of New Day. He's the best. But
you my tag
definitely
team
those.
You my tag team partner, man.
Always.
People's champ. What's your moment? What's your favorite moment of Shawn Michaels? Moment or match?
Favorite match has to be his comeback match in 2002 when he was in our backyard at Nassau Memorial Coliseum when he took on Triple H back at SummerSlam. Probably one of the best matches I've ever seen for someone who came back after a major back injury, even though Triple H was on some BS at the time, and I wanted to basically take Triple H out myself. But it was one of the greatest moments I've ever seen for Shawn Michaels. And, of course, my favorite, the WrestleMania 12, the Iron Man match between him and Bret the Hitman Hart when a boyhood dream came true when he won the WWF Championship title at WrestleMania and when it went overtime in the Iron Man match.
Alrighty. And last but not least, Kid Dynamite. Favorite moment of Shawn Michaels or match? Go.
I've talked enough. I'd be here all day talking about how much I love Shawn Michaels, but I think we're forgetting one of the most iconic moments of Shawn Michaels' career, and that's when he kicked Stan. We're not going to sit here and forget about him knocking Ty Dillinger's ass out.
Boy, he knocked him straight. That's not the first person that he brought back to OVW.
That's true, but I feel like there's so many iconic matches and moments, obviously. Yeah. But one of the things people keep forgetting about Shawn Michaels isn't just his heart, isn't just him being cocky. His improv is amazing. And this man in the 2000s on that, midlife crisis DX run was one of the funniest things I think we've ever seen. I mean, granted, some people didn't like that DX run. I didn't like the third one in 2009 either, to be quite honest with you. But the 2006 one with fighting McMahons and all that stuff was so damn funny. And I just love the fact that Shawn legit was just like, I screwed over Bret in Montreal, and you married, what's your name? And then just like, hey, you, what's your name? Stan. Yeah. All right. Just shrugs his shoulders, super ticks. See, I just kicked. That was one of the real memes, like the original memes from back prior to, like, non-wrestling fans remember that.
Yep.
That's how iconic that moment is. So I just had to bring that up because I know no one else is going to do it. I had to. That's a champion.
Of course, the other one I posted on my personal Facebook page. With Crime Time, we talked about this before.
We introduced that low. I speak to her.
Gotta get in the hizzle, see the shizzle.
For shizzle.
Happy birthday to HB Shizzle. Our Leo he's a Leo, man. He ain't no dude.
Yeah, he's in between Cancer and Leo. I kind of want to just steal him.
No, he's in the grace period of like being a Leo Cancer hybrid. He acts more like a Leo.
Listen,
so hey,
true. Listen, I don't know. I don't do the rules with the horoscopes. It is what it is.
Wait. Yeah. Before we go, when he super kicked a girl before SummerSlam 2009, that little girl.
Oh,
yeah, she did.
Bro, I saw food fly. I stopped. I couldn't. He said Summerfest, super kicked a girl. That dude Triple H got hit on by a gay dude that looked like Shawn with the blonde.
That was funny. Oh my God.
You can't. Yo, I'm killing y'all with these random super kick moments. All right? We got like 70 more. We'll do that another day.
That's a fact. Like, we do. We definitely do it another day. Hopefully, we do it in a quick picks episode. Who knows, man?
Hey,
but in any event, we got People's Champ, we got Kid Ty, we got Diamond Cuddy, we got myself, the Golden Child. We're out. Peace, guys.